The Baltimore Ravens have been the kings of the AFC North for the past 2 seasons, and they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in the wild card round this past season. And there's a story that's emerged of the Ravens clowning Pittsburgh after that game. So we talk about that. Joe Flacco weighing in on his Baltimore past and also what could have been his Baltimore future. And we are 1 week away from the 2025 NFL Draft. All that and more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens. We are your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every single day. And we have daily Ravens coverage for you every Monday through Friday. We do bonus episodes on the weekends. We have live shows after every Ravens game, after every piece of Ravens big news. So we are all Ravens all the time here on Locked On Ravens. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Here with me, it is Jake Louque of the Exit 52 podcast. Jake, I know the Orioles haven't given us much to talk about in the positive way this season. The Ravens, though, 1 week away from the draft. That's always something to be excited about, especially when you get the annuals Liars Luncheon and Derrick and John Harbaugh go up there and, not give away their entire draft board, although maybe a little more candid than I thought from Eric DeCosta about the whole Mark Andrews thing.
Yeah, I think we'll see about that. I feel like every time we walk away from these things, we say liar's luncheon, we say this, that, and the other about how you shouldn't believe it, but we always kind of end up taking at least some of these things at face value. I remember one year, I think it was A, the liar's luncheon, and then B, I think Rashod might have sat in on it or something, and he was like, yeah, I think we're, defensive lineman in the second round, maybe grab a tight end in the fourth round. Like, it was just basically like laying out all their plans, and like, I don't know if it exactly played out that way. I think these guys love kind of riling the media up a little bit, and I think they enjoy kind of throwing sort of the smoke screens out there, kind of the cloak and dagger aspect of it. I think back to a couple of years ago, I think it was 2021, Eric DeCosta, it's insulting that people don't like our young receivers. I'm quite insulted by it, to be honest. And then he drafts Rashod, Bateman, and Tylan Wallace in rounds 1 and 4. 2 picks that have worked out fairly well, I'd say. So,
yeah, there was a lot that was said there, and there always is. And I appreciate that, especially we know Eric DeCosta has a prankster side to him. So, I always try to see if there's a story he tells or something he says in that press conference where it's like, I don't know if that's real or not, but again, we kind of see the Ravens outline some of their draft plans, but they're not going to give us their entire draft board there. We'll get to some draft talk later in the show. Jake, there was a story that came out just yesterday. It got traction, and it was from Denny Heifetz, who does work with The Ringer, Yahoo, and this story ended up coming off of, he was talking with Matt Harmon on the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. And we all know the Ravens absolutely dominated Pittsburgh the last 2 times that they met up over the course of last year, especially in the playoffs. It was, pretty bad for Pittsburgh in that game. And Heifetz ended up saying that when talking about the Steelers and teams that they can't quite figure out, which we'll get to and kind of where they are in the AFC North conversation with Baltimore, the Ravens were joking about the Steelers after their playoff matchup. Apparently, Heifetz said, quote, "I covered that game. I was in the Ravens locker room. The Ravens were making fun of the Steelers game plan straight up. The Ravens were making fun of the Steelers game plan, not to the reporters, but if you heard what they were saying amongst themselves." And we know that Derrick Henry had his way. The Ravens offense, that Pittsburgh defense was struggling to stop anything the Ravens were throwing their way. When you look at Pittsburgh right now, Jake, they've added DK Metcalf. They have George Pickens there. Their quarterback situation, you might be going out there and being their quarterback in week 1. That's kind of where it is right now. If Aaron Rodgers doesn't sign that deal, or if they don't get Shedeur Sanders, where are you with Pittsburgh right now? Because it felt like those games are always so back and forth, like ever since these 2 teams started really being rivals. But those last 2 games were just pure domination by the Ravens.
You know what? I first of all, I don't know if I'd agree with that premise. I think that second game of the season, the second regular season one, I think that was actually a pretty competitive game up until the Marlon Humphrey pick 6. I remember kind of sweating that one out a little bit. So I'd say Steelers get the better of them in Pittsburgh in kind of their typical devil magic way. It felt like a game the Ravens could have won 5 different times, but they're putting the ball on the ground and stupid turnovers and things of that nature. Lamar missing a wide open likely, I remember, on one of those plays. And then, that second game was a lot more competitive. I thought both teams looked crisp and kind of clean. And I don't know, the Russell Wilson fumble down by the goal line maybe wouldn't necessarily speak to that. Then he throws the pick six later, but they moved the ball like decently well in that game. I remember Pickens getting open for a touchdown deep, maybe down the right side. And I don't know. I remember that one being certainly a little bit closer than the playoff game, which I think that one much more so was kind of runaway. Like, all right, we got this one. I think the Ravens kind of get the monkey off their back when they finally did beat them a couple weeks prior in that aforementioned regular season game. So I don't know, like the Steelers, to me, like to your overall question about where I see them just as a competitor within this AFC North landscape, kind of similar to where I saw them last year, where I think they're going to be competitive. They're going to, be in the mix to win 10 games as long as Mike Tomlin is coach. And I think if Rodgers signs there, that'll definitely solidify that for me. But I just feel like they've found a way to like figure it out with middling quarterbacks, going all the way back to when Pickett was kind of a guy that they certainly reached for. And I don't know, Wilson, for as much as people want to make fun of him and clown on him, and it is fun to do that at times, I think he was competent enough. But I think in the big picture, I think that'll continue to frustrate Steelers fans who are like, hey, we're tired of that. Like, we want to go and win playoff games. We want to go and win a Super Bowl ring. It's been, what has it been, 15 years, 16 years now since they've won one? I mean, like, we're coming up on a long stretch here for a franchise that has the most of any. And, they're pretty proud of that fact. And, I don't know, like, just if you want to go and sign Aaron Rodgers, go ahead. Like, you might well beat the Ravens in one or even two games doing so, but I just don't see that as a long-term solution. And Shadur Sanders, I think that would excite me a lot if I were a Pittsburgh fan, but we'll see if he even, really falls to them.
Yeah, I want to, let me adjust what I said, because that Pittsburgh, the fumble with Ardarius, that was when the game turned. If Pittsburgh had scored on that possession, you might be talking about a Steelers blowout. But from that fumble, the moment from there on really felt like the Ravens captured that momentum back. And it was like, okay, now things just broke in the Ravens' way. And they got that momentum.
Maybe I'm misremembering. I think the Ravens might have put the ball on the ground, but recovered it a few times. And it was kind of like, it was feeling a little wobbly. Maybe that's just how I kind of was at that point in the season. I was a little, just kind of on the edge, are they going to win the division, this, that, and the other. I remember I was sitting in the end zone for that game. That was a fun one, right in front of Mr. Unlimited as he put the ball on the ground, which is great.
Yeah, that was the game where the Ravens had some of the best fumble luck I've ever seen in a game, because I think that it was, who was the guy that they brought in to return kicks? He was like an honorary Raven 4 times over.
Yeah.
Desmond King. Desmond King.
Yeah.
Desmond King fumble.
One of the best 5th round picks of all time.
Oh my God. Yeah. He was someone I wanted on the Ravens for like 5 years.
He went I remember he went in the 5th round or something that year, and it was like, dude, this guy's a dog for the Hawkeyes. And it's Kirk Ferentz. You would have thought the Ravens would be all over that, but
yeah, it felt like every break after, and even with the fumble like they had early, because wasn't there one on the first possession too, or second possession, that Pittsburgh almost recovered, but the ball bounced back? Like, sometimes the ball just bounces your way.
And yeah, to be clear, I think they were maybe owed that a little bit in these Pittsburgh matchups the last couple of years. Maybe getting a little bit of luck to fall back your way isn't the worst thing every once in a while.
Yeah, but I do know that with the whole Rodgers situation, and obviously the way that Pittsburgh season ended, and obviously this story here from Danny Heifetz talking about how the Ravens were just kind of like, what a game plan, or just joking around with each other. Pittsburgh's in a weird spot right now. I agree with you. Sanders is a guy that I think, it's much better than the Aaron Rodgers. I mean, from a Ravens perspective, I'm just like, please, Pittsburgh, go sign Aaron Rodgers and have Rodgers, Pickens, and Metcalf in a locker room together. But I don't know if there's anything that Pittsburgh or even Cincinnati or Cleveland could do to put them over the Ravens in the division for me. I know that the big story, Jake, is no team has ever won the North 3 times in a row. Baltimore will be going for that this season, but it just feels like Baltimore didn't lose too much this offseason. They added a couple of solid pieces, not too many, but this draft, is there a move that would put a team over the Ravens to you, or do you still think it's Baltimore's division to lose?
No, I just don't think that's really like the way the draft works. I think like the older I get, like I used to get really excited about it, and I'm still excited about it, particularly like I think your first round pick is typically one that you do kind of want to be able to step in on day one and produce. But a draft really is like, it's a 3-4 year process as far as like improving your team in the long run. So the idea that like one of these teams that's none of them really are picking in the top 10 outside of Cleveland, who knows what they're going to do there. They, probably try and draft a quarterback here. Cam Ward probably going to the Titans. So I guess we'll see what they want to do, but they might, they could very well pick Hunter, but if they do that, they've got Flacco and they've got Pickett in that quarterback room right now. And I don't really see them as being hyper competitive. The Bengals kind of right in the middle there. Like they've kind of had a weird offseason with Hubbard retiring. And I don't know. I feel like their defense will probably get a little bit better by default. I struggle to imagine their offense. I feel like they'll come back down by default a little bit too. So I think if they shore things up schematically, almost, it's not even really like as much a talent issue as it is just, figuring things out with their new defensive coordinator, whose name is escaping me at this moment. But yeah, I think they'll probably figure things out and be a more competitive, kind of serious option here to win the division, because I mean they almost made the playoffs with just legitimately one of the worst defenses I've ever seen. I feel like it could very well find its level for them and they get back in the mix. And they frankly they scared me more than the Steelers last year. They will scare me more than the Steelers going into this year, just with the receiving options that they have. Getting both of those guys back I think is important, and having Burrow there locked up long term. I think they're kind of more. Obviously the Steelers won more games. They're just a scarier team to me to face in a one game scenario. And then like I said, the Steelers, sure, go sign Rodgers, do whatever you got to do, win your 9-10 games, sneak into the playoffs. You don't want to take that for granted as a fan, but I can also understand why they're getting a little bit frustrated, and frankly why that it just doesn't do much for me. And of course, with Aaron Rodgers, there has to be this 4-week drawn out saga signing with the Steelers. And it's like, we're going to act like this is some big, massive thing. I don't know, he was maybe a little bit better than people are remembering last season. At least his numbers were pretty solid. He, maybe threw 28 touchdowns, not that many picks. Okay. But you got your Devontae Adams and you got your Garrett Wilson. And that was a solid team talent wise. I don't know. I'm not saying Rodgers was the sole reason why they weren't that good, and maybe getting in a coaching environment with Tomlin could unlock things a little bit, better for him. But overall, I just don't. Again, Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson are force multipliers at quarterback. I think Aaron Rodgers used to be that, but he is now just kind of a competent. At this point in his career, is a journeyman starter to me. So.
Yeah, it's so intriguing because you mentioned Cincinnati and the way that they scare you. And, the offense is so high powered, and we know that Jamar Chase has had more success against the Ravens than any team in his entire career. That is including 2 games where he didn't really have a lot going on for him. So you have him and Higgins locked up long term. It's just a matter of, can that defense stop the Ravens? They should have won both of the games that they played against Baltimore last season. Obviously, a missed kick by McPherson, and then, huge turnover by Humphrey. It was just those plays where Baltimore took advantage of it. And you have these 40-37 or whatever the final score was, 36-35 games. Whereas for Pittsburgh, like we saw in the playoff game, if their offense isn't hitting and their defense can't stop anything, then the Ravens will run them over. But if we saw what happened in Pittsburgh, where they just slop the game up and the Ravens play sloppy football, that's how you beat the Ravens. And that's what we've seen over and over and over again, is them becoming their worst enemy. And it just feels like Pittsburgh is the top team that does that to the Ravens more often than not.
It feels like the Bengals find a way to step their foot on the gas as the season goes along, and the Steelers just leak oil as the season goes along. I don't remember exactly what happened the year prior, but it felt similar. And then this year they kind of just kind of ran out of gas. And you tie it all the way back to that Danny Heifetz anecdote where the Ravens are making fun of their game plan. Yeah, you can make fun of their game plan, and you can make fun of, I think, Arthur Smith and everything, but it's what else are they supposed to do? They've just got a limited. I say that, wholly unironically. I wasn't even trying to make the joke there. Limited version of Russell Wilson. And then, the George Pickens with just kind of the weird attitude, who's, good player and everything. But I don't know, it's just a weird fit where it's just you're just going to keep trotting these middling quarterbacks out there, and you're going to kind of run this bland scheme to an extent that did okay with the Titans and, Nashville and all that, but maybe didn't work so well in Atlanta. I don't know. It just feels like they're trying to play 2003 version of football, and we're 20 years past that at this point. So, all
right, yeah, I'm gonna draw it out for you. It was limited. That's limited. What limited.
He started a new golf brand. I saw that last week. I was pretty.
I didn't even see that. Oh, I think my favorite, the Danger Witch ads will always be my favorite. Russ thing.
That's just one of the more unhinged what is going on here? This feels like kind of a art house film. I don't know. He's just looking in the camera. I I don't even remember what he was saying, but man, that was strange.
There are so many Russell Wilson stories. You know what? We were blessed to have him in the AFC North for a year, but Baltimore to me still the favorite in the division. Speaking of the division, an old friend is back in the division in Joe Flacco, and he opened up on his past in Baltimore and also his potential future that possibly could have happened in Baltimore, but ended up not happening. So stay tuned. We got plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena. With Gametime, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals on tickets can save you up to 60%. Here's why I use Gametime. You have these last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. Plus, the all-in pricing means there are no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Again, download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, Jake Louque of Exit 52 still here talking with me. We talked about the Ravens, a story emerging about them clouding the Steelers after the playoff win over the Steelers in the wild card round. But let's go to another team in the division, the Cleveland Browns, who also have a weird quarterback situation of their own. The Deshaun Watson move, like nobody could have predicted. Spoiler was everybody predicted that fell through with Deshaun Watson. It was a disaster of a move. They are still paying for it today. They bring in Joe Flacco again, a quarterback who led Cleveland to the promised land, which for them was the playoffs a couple of years ago. They moved on. They tried it with Deshaun Watson. It didn't work. Flacco went to Indianapolis and backed up Anthony Richardson, sometimes played over Anthony Richardson, which is a whole nother saga story conversation. But Joe Flacco's back in Cleveland, and he ended up opening up about his free agency journey and what could potentially have been a reunion with the Ravens. He talked to Mike Preston over at the Baltimore Sun, and that he actually had a brief conversation about possibly returning to the Ravens this offseason. That, you know, there was a conversation between the Ravens and Joe's agent about the Ravens gauging interest about whether Joe was going to play and, you know, what his plan was. And Joe was asked from his agent, he's like, what do you want me to tell him? And Joe said, well, listen, I'm interested. I don't know what's going to happen. It's not like choice number one. I don't know what's going to happen here with me if I'm going to get an opportunity to do something a little bit more, but I wasn't against it. I think I would have been excited about it in a little bit of a way. Now, obviously, we know Flacco's back in Cleveland. The Ravens signed a Cooper Rush to a deal to back up Lamar Jackson. Jake, would have been like a storybook storyline of Flacco? Oh, he's back in Baltimore. He's back with Lamar Jackson, and Lamar's this MVP, and Joe was one of the mentors, or I guess maybe not if you read some storylines and believe them or not about Lamar and Joe's relationship. But would that have been like a storybook thing for you, or were you just more kind of like, kind of over it at this point?
Yeah, you know, weird scheme fit for them for one thing. Like I feel like Cooper Rush is a lot more mobile. Like I feel like that signing is, you know, I feel like it just makes more sense on paper as far as a guy that you would want to back up a Lamar Jackson. So kind of an old lumbering Joe Flacco with a bad back and a surgically repaired knee that we saw plenty of, you know, in the latter half of like, you know, 2015 through 2018. Like, I don't know. That wasn't super appealing to me. I think obviously he looked a little healthier and a little more lithe and lean in those Cleveland, you know, starts that he had. Even with Indy, I thought he looked solid as well. But I don't know. It just didn't really like fit all that well for me. And it's like for him, you want to be able to go to a place where you're going to be able to make starts, even if health is not a factor. So like with a Richardson whose play, I think tailed off a little bit. I think that's why he was able to get in there. And like, also that made sense for both parties because he's an older guy who can come in and mentor a young guy. So that's like part of the, you know, job description for an older backup quarterback who's experienced and done all those kinds of things. So Lamar doesn't really need that at this point. Like we're kind of past the point of him needing the vet mentor backup. So he's got, you know, Cooper Rush, who's kind of one of more of his contemporaries. So yeah, I think Flacco going to Cleveland where he's familiar, you know, the fans obviously love him there. They've still got Deshaun Watson, who, you know, that plays pretty nicely off of them. That'll make them kind of still love him. And, Kenny Pickett's like this weirdly kind of irascible character who's just like, I don't understand why he's always so angry, but he seems to be. And then like Flacco's just kind of like the down the middle, like smooth kind of character. I think he fits in pretty well with that Cleveland environment. So yeah, I think that's, just overall, that's the better fit for him. Like it would have been fun, I guess, but if they had done it, I would have been it just would have been like, oh, okay. Like it's just scratch my head a little bit and, good to see him back in the uniform. I mean, I'm sure he'll come back and, do the 1-day contract and retire a Raven here someday. But there's just always at least one or two of these just weird stories in the offseason. And this one kind of like that kind of took my ear a little bit. I was like, huh, interesting. That's what you guys were doing. Huh.
Yeah. What would have felt like they were, I don't want to say chasing the storyline, but it would feel more like the storybook. Oh, Joe's back, instead of well, how does it actually work on the field? And you're right. I think Cooper's a high level backup at this point who, there's a conversation about it. We'll get to it in a couple minutes because the backup quarterback position caused way more controversy than I ever thought it would this offseason for the Ravens. But Flacco kind of on the Ryan Ripken show, Ryan Ripken talked to him and had another conversation. And Joe was asked about returning to Baltimore on the Browns. Because I remember a couple of years ago, there was that, were the Ravens going to play the Browns in the playoffs? Is Joe going to come back to Baltimore in a Browns uniform? Is he going to knock Lamar and the Ravens out? There was that whole storyline. But Joe ended up talking about on his return to Baltimore, he said, quote, "I sure hope I'm on the field. I haven't been back in that stadium since I left. It's just an unbelievable place to play. It'll be a little different coming in a different uniform." I still remember the fan base being so split on Joe when he was in Cleveland the first time. There was some of the fan base that was like, oh, we love Joe. We're going to root for him wherever he goes, Raven for life, this, that, and the other. There was the other portion of the fan base that was like, it's the Browns, division rival, can't root for Joe, like wish everything bad for Joe on the Browns. When he's off the Browns, we can root for him again. Where were you in that conversation, and where are you now on it?
Yeah, I definitely wasn't rooting for the Browns, but I was happy for him personally. He just always like went about his business the right way. And I think he got a lot of maybe some undue crap for like the whole, doesn't have much of a personality thing, like people wanting him to be this vocal leader. And I don't know, he's just a guy who, it's funny. Like I kind of talked about this after he started, funnily enough, doing more media and being more open to people during that whole run. It seemed like, and anyone who was in the trenches, back in like early 2010s, like even before that, people really didn't like Joe Flacco across the NFL. Like he was just looked at as like a bad quarterback or a middling, mediocre quarterback who was carried by a great roster. And I think like when he was a younger guy, that was maybe a little bit more fair, but like he developed into, I thought, a pretty, decent to good starting quarterback. And obviously he had the greatest playoff run of all time for a QB that anyone has seen. And I don't know, like I think, and then, him getting paid, that made people hate him, even more, because it's like, oh, this guy's overpaid, this, that, and the other. And he was just, and Skip Bayless, like with the whole, like going after him on First Take, like he was just this weird lightning rod for a guy who like has a pinball machine in his basement and lives in Owings Mills and is like best friends with Dennis Pitta. And it's just like totally like kind of a dial tone from a personality perspective, like really nice guy, like good hard worker, talented. Like it was just weird to me that like he was so hated for so long. And then, he comes back on that Cleveland run and he's on an underdog team really for the first time in his career in like a real way, not in like a Ravens, chip on our shoulder underdog way, and leads them to the playoffs. And he starts doing more media. And then, all of a sudden he's going on these podcasts and kind of opening up about those old Ravens days and kind of just seemed at peace with himself. It's just funny to see them come, everyone kind of take this full, circuitous kind of full circle route with Flacco, where all of a sudden he's now this beloved kind of, Pied Piper-esque character for NFL fans. And so like I was really happy for him through all of that. I wasn't like rooting for the Browns though. Like if, when they lost in the playoffs, I was like, okay. Like, and I feel like anyone could have seen that coming. Like if you were like actually watching those games, like they were getting away with so much stuff. Like, some of the throws that he was making, it was just kind of vintage Joe, just hawk one up there. And like, maybe that's how other fan bases felt watching him on the Ravens with, lob one up to Torrey. He's down there somewhere. Let's get that pass interference. But he, like I said, I definitely wasn't like rooting for the Browns or rooting for him to go out there and, tear it up. But if he did, it's like, yeah, all right. Like, I still got love for the guy. So that's cool.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Joe, I think, has always gotten kind of a bad rep for not a good reason. And the fact that he kind of has been the same guy over the course of his career, I'm glad to see that he is now endeared to the media. And coming up, we will round out our backup quarterback conversation, as well as talk about some draft and what Eric DeCosta had to say at the pre-draft press conference. Stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. And you can post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. LinkedIn has everything that you need in order to find the right people for your job openings. Again, post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Locked On Ravens here. Kevin Oestreicher, Jake Louque still racking out with you on this Thursday, 1 week away officially from the 2025 NFL Draft. And Jake, I mentioned it in the second part of the show. The Cooper Rush signing had so much backlash from a lot of people. You know, it's, oh, why would you spend this money on a backup quarterback? Cooper Rush, why? To me, we can both agree that if Lamar Jackson goes down for the season or has to miss the rest of the year regardless, the season is pretty much done. Like, you know, it is what it is. But my thing with the backup quarterback position is if Lamar has to go down for, let's just say, the beginning of October for 2 months and he comes back in December, you want to have a guy that can weather that storm for you and go 6-2 if he misses 8 games, 5-3 instead of 1-7, because by the time Lamar would get back, you're either fighting for a wild card spot or you're just out of the playoff picture altogether. That's where having a good backup quarterback and spending resources on it matters. So yes, while some people wanted Josh Johnson back or other people wanted them to take a rookie to have on that scale or give Devin Leary a shot, I do think it's worthwhile to invest in that position. Not crazy amounts of money, but I don't think the Cooper Rush contract was anything to get like super upset about.
Yeah, no, I think I either like was taking a break from X at the time, or I just, was not really dialed in on this one. I think I like caught a slight sort of whiff of people getting really worked up about this. And I was like, yeah, that's the Jerry Seinfeld gif. Like, I'm good. Just walk out. Like, it's just like, of all the things to get mad about, I don't think this is one that would really get onto my radar necessarily. I think you make a really good point there. With all the people that say like, oh, well, if Lamar goes down, like the season's over, like there could be a situation where we've seen it. He gets sick, right? When it's November and his immune system, which is famously not very good. I think somebody might have been like JP Acosta or somebody said he has the immune system of a, frail little Victorian era child. And like that could go wrong and he misses one game and you need to win one game. And they did it with Tyler Huntley once. So I get the argument that you maybe don't necessarily need to even spend money for that, but yeah, it could be 2 games, could be 3, could be 4. In that situation, I'd very much like to be competitive in games and see them try and make a push for the playoffs. If you don't, and you want them to just tank it and try to get a better draft pick, like, God bless you, I guess, but that's just not why I watch sports.
You're not paying the guy $10 million per season. It's relatively cheap for the player that Cooper Rush is. He's one of the higher level backups in the league. I'm fine with it. Not the best signing in the world, not the worst signing in the world, as you mentioned, Jake. I don't really need to get upset about it. Like, it's not something that's going to make or break the Ravens season, but it could make or break a game or two. And that is kind of where the thought process is. Let's move back into the Liars Luncheon, as people call it, the pre-draft press conference. Eric DeCosta, again, the big storyline was his Mark Andrews comments. He also talked about defensive line, safety, corner, Darius Washington. What were kind of your big takeaways? I think there's been a big tone shift in the Mark Andrews. Honestly, it's been flip-flopping for a month or two now, but what'd you make of his comments?
I just like, for all the people that are kind of really reading into it and thinking that he's going to be gone, I don't know. Like, the fact that he does put it out there and it is called the Liars Luncheon and he's kind of making it seem like maybe he could go, that makes me a little concerned that, or not concerned, maybe makes me a little convinced that he probably is going to remain within the picture. And I just don't understand like why you would do it probably at this point. Like you said, we're a week away. It will probably come after the draft. I don't know, like, how that would necessarily help you for the 2025 season, where you're losing. I know some people don't want to hear it, but you're losing a still a good player, a guy who produced pretty well for you down the stretch last season. And we all know what happened in the playoff game, multiple mistakes. I get all that, but I don't know. He's like a guy who, and Eric also said that they've been in contact with Lamar about the draft. Like, this is one you would have to clear with Lamar. Like, Mark has been his guy since literally day one. They got drafted together, and they've done a lot of great things together on the field. So I don't know. I think he's just a guy that I feel like Harbaugh as well would have trouble moving on from. Well, he might still have some meat on the bone here as far as what he can produce for you. So I don't know. I could see them doing it because, yeah, I think a lot of people are right that the cap hit is maybe a little bit too high, but, and especially, of course, with the context of likely right behind him. But I don't know. I struggle to envision a scenario where you could get much back for him that could help you, A, in the long run, and B, definitely in the short run. Like, I don't know what return you would get that would help you in 2025 for the season. So,
yeah, I'm of the mindset that, like, look, we heard Mike Garafolo 2 nights ago talk about the fact that he and Dallas Goedert were both available at the start of the league year. Nothing materialized. They pulled him back because they didn't get what they wanted. And I agree with you where it's like Mark is still an elite tight end in this league. I understand the Buffalo game was bad. The playoff success hasn't matched his regular season success for the most part, but this is still a top 5 tight end. And I just think with Isaiah Likely, yes, he is 100% ready, like 100% ready to take over if it came down to it. But if you're not getting at least a day 2 pick, you just don't trade him to trade him. It doesn't make sense. You know, part of the reason why the Ravens offense can be so dominant is the fact that you have to worry about Mark. You have to worry about Isaiah Likely, all the other weapons on the Ravens offense. Plus, you're probably going to get a 4th round pick for him anyway if he leaves in the offseason next year. So if you're getting a 4th this year, I just think it's worth it to have the production for one more season than let him walk. So it just feels like to me, if they get that offer, Ian Rappaport said, like, hey, if a team comes in with that offer that they can't refuse, then that's fine. Like, if it's a 2nd, or if they package Mark into 2nd for a late 1st, I don't know what that looks like, but that's fine. But just to move off of him, and even now with the bonus being guaranteed, I mean, it's now $7 million in savings instead of $11 million, which is not a small chunk of change right there. I mean, I just feel like if it were to happen, and you mentioned after the draft, and it very well could possibly be, but I think that, you know, if anything, it's almost like percentage-wise, high percentage it could have happened before the bonus, medium percentage it would happen after, and then probably low percentage it happens after. It just keeps going down with each milestone you hit to the point where you're right. It's just like he says all this, but it almost kind of feels like he's going to stay. So I don't really know what their plan is, but I know that there have been so many outcomes that have been talked about.
yeah, definitely. And yeah, no, it is weird to be paying like a backup tight end or like a split starting tight end $16.9 million. So I like totally get it from that standpoint, but yeah. I don't know. It just feels like they're in a weird spot time wise for it, where I just don't understand where like you said, where the compensation could actually work out to be good for the Ravens in this. And if they waited too long and then they chase bad money with bad money and get rid of him just to get rid of him and get a couple $1 million off the books, like you mentioned, the savings would only be about $2 million by that point. You know, I don't know if it's worth it. And like you said, he could leave after the season. You get a nice 4th round comp pick for him. Might be worth just hanging on to him for another year, but that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And now the draft, with it being 1 week away, the Ravens, I think I call it positional freedom after they re-signed Ronnie Stanley. You don't have to go any which way. You can go best player available. We know that's how Eric DeCosta likes to operate anyway. How do you look at this roster? You look at this draft. Where do you want to see them go? Is there any player in particular you like? Any positions you're looking out for? What's kind of your overall draft position right now?
Yeah, maybe not as dialed in as I should be with some of the prospects, but some of the interior linemen that people like, I'm into that, into the idea of, because like I said earlier, like it feels like the first rounds, you want to try and get a starter there, right? Somebody that could come in right from day one. And we've seen the Ravens do that in the past with, I mean, even Wiggins wound up kind of being that guy for them down the stretch last year. So yeah, I think that's a position of need, and Falele is well documented, kind of a weird fit as a right guard. So maybe you'd look to find the future of that position there. And then, I don't know, like people like this kid, Emmon that you could pair with Kyle Hamilton. That's an exciting idea to me. And, you know, they said that it's pretty likely that they're going to take a cornerback, and I think they'd love to add some depth there with the loss of Brandon Stevens. So yeah, I don't know. Those probably are the three positions that I'm eyeing up right now.
A lot of ways they could go. 11 draft picks. It's a lot of draft picks. So I'm sure Eric DeCosta, as he said, flexibility. He will be trying to maneuver up and down that draft board. But Jake, I appreciate you as always for hopping on. Tell people where they can find you and what you're working on. Even though the Ravens are out of season, I know the Orioles are in season. You're doing content around them right now also.
Yep, absolutely. It's a Exit 52 podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube as well. If you want to throw us a subscribe button there, we'd appreciate it. You can find us on social media at Exit 52 podcast on Twitter, and I'm at Jake Louque, and that's Louque.
You can find all the links to Jake's work in the description down below. Check him out. Check Exit 52 out. All those guys over there do great stuff. Jake, appreciate you again. And thank you to everybody who watched, listened today to Locked On Ravens. Coming up tomorrow, we'll be rounding out the week with more Ravens talk, more draft talk. So be sure on the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form, follow along in audio form, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.